User's Guide, Simple Mental Rotation Tasks Suite. This screenshot illustrates the main menu of the application. Menu items include a mental rotation task, bistable image viewing, cerebellar exercises related to smooth pursuit and saccadic eye movements, and a troxler fading/gaze stabilization exercise task. All of these tasks have been shown in basic science research to preferentially activate the right parietal lobe of the brain. It is believed that the right parietal lobe represents the area of the vestibular cortex. In theory, stimulation of this area of the brain may enhance rehabilitation efforts in patients suffering from dizziness, vertigo, and/or disequilibrium. Before we proceed with the protocols and the specific utilization of the various components of this application, let's take a quick look at some research which suggests the involvement of the right parietal lobe with vestibular processing. From the medical journal Cerebral Cortex, published in March 2022, the authors report that activity in a specific part of the parietal cortex correlated in patients suffering with chronic visually induced dizziness. They go on to say that subregions of the right parietal cortex showed strong connectivity to other vestibular areas. This study corroborates the finding that the right parietal lobe houses pathways and structures related to vestibular processing. Another study, published in Brain Topography in September 2017, again provides evidence that the right parietal lobe is associated with visual spatial perspective. The authors further report that activity in this part of the brain and brain oscillations theta range in this area are associated with mental perceptual rotations. Finally, this article, published in Frontiers of Human Neuroscience, July 2021, demonstrates that spatial training tasks in children activate preferentially the right parietal lobe, and also interestingly, these spatial tasks are correlated with increased scores on mathematical testing in children. So from the app's main menu, you can see the start pages of the various subroutines. In the upper left is a mental rotation task, which utilizes images of the human foot. The program provides a reference, image 1. Upon determining if the foot in image number 1 is right-sided or left-sided, the task is to choose which image, from images 2 through 4 matches the sidedness of the foot seen in image number 1. The image on the lower left-hand side of the screen demonstrates the start page for viewing bistable images. Look at the image. Do you see a rabbit or a duck? This is an example of a bistable image. Research has shown that when your perspective switches between the rabbit and the duck, metabolic activity increases in the right parietal lobe. The image in the upper right part of the screen represents the left cerebellar/right parietal lobe activating exercises that employ both smooth pursuit and saccadic eye movement. And finally, the image in the bottom right side of the screen illustrates a troxler fading circle, which is used as part of a gaze stabilization rehabilitation protocol. Using a mental rotation task improves balance. A study on postural stability examined the effects of mental rotation using a foot stimuli. The participants performed randomly assigned mental rotation tasks for 10 minutes. The amount of the patient's body sway during standing was measured immediately after the intervention and 60 minutes after the task. The results of this intervention showed that using a foot stimuli was more effective than using a hand or an inanimate object stimuli. The results show that beneficial effects were observed up to 60 minutes after the intervention. This study was published in the Journal of Motor Behavior, published in July 2016. It provides direct evidence that performing mental rotation tasks, particularly of images of the human foot, provided long-lasting improvement of postural stability. This study demonstrates increased activity in the right parietal lobe during ocular rivalry. So when the brain perceives a bistable image, like the one depicted, the switching between the duck interpretation and rabbit interpretation is associated with increased activity in the right parietal lobe. This study is published in Science Data 2016 August. It provides additional evidence that viewing a bistable image is associated with an increased activity in the right parietal lobe. This is a study published in Experimental Brain Research, 2012 October. And it demonstrates that the area of the brain involved bistable image perception is also involved with the integration of vestibular input. Taken together, these studies suggest that, when a person views a bistable image, it enhances neuronal activity in that part of the parietal lobe, which is also associated with vestibular processing. Based on these findings, and others, we include bistable image viewing as part of our rehabilitation efforts in patients suffering from various types of balance disorders or postural instability. Research has shown that smooth pursuit eye movements, which originate in the upper left part of the visual field and track down into the right, activate the right parietal lobe pathways, originating in the left cerebellum. Likewise, saccadic eye movement, in the opposite direction, are also known to activate the right parietal lobe. To start the eye movement exercise, tap on the red circle. Note there is a 3-second delay from the time you tap the red circle until the motion is initiated. Do not tap the circle more than once. With your head pointing straight ahead, use your eyes to follow the movement of the red circle from top left to bottom right. When the circle reaches the lower right side of the screen, it will snap back to the upper left side of the screen. By following this movement with your eyes, you will produce the desired saccade. After another 3-second delay, the target motion will repeat. This will occur for 3 cycles. To repeat this cycle, press the reset button and once again tap the red circle, wait 3 seconds, and follow the moving target with your eyes. Remember to keep your head pointing straight ahead. This screen illustrates troxler fading, which can be used as part of the gaze stabilization exercise routine. Troxler fading is the perceptual disappearance of a stationary image upon sustained fixation of gaze. Troxler fading can be used to estimate microsaccades since the perception of fading is correlated with diminished microsaccade activity. Furthermore, the troxler fading phenomena has been linked with activity in the right parietal lobe. This suggests with increased activity in the right parietal lobe, there is an associated decreased microsaccade activity or increased gaze stability. These findings were published in the journal Frontiers of Neurology and Neuroscience Research, published in 2021. A more traditional gaze stabilization exercise includes a sequence starting with fixating gaze straight ahead by focusing on the center dot inside the circle. Then fixating to the target to the left of center. Shifting gaze back to straight ahead. Then shifting gaze to the right of center. Next shifting back to the center dot. Then shifting the gaze vertically to a target on the top of the circle. Next, shift gaze to straight ahead again. From straight ahead, shift the gaze downward to the target at the bottom of the circle, below center. And finally, shifting the gaze one last time back to the central target to complete the sequence. Don't worry, the app guides you through this sequence. Research suggests that shifting the gaze to the left or right of center increases activity in the contralateral hemisphere. So in terms of activating the right parietal lobe, for the purposes of rehabilitation of balance dysfunction or postural instability, bias towards the left side of the visual field will preferentially activate the right hemisphere. From the journal Neuroimaging, published in 2005 October, other researchers demonstrated increased parietal lobe activation and gaze stability when gaze was lateral to a central fixation point. According to the authors, this forces perception into a head-centered frame of reference. In addition to a stationary fixation, gaze stability exercises also incorporate oscillating movements of the head from left to right, with gaze fixated on the central target, known as a no-no exercise, or oscillating movements vertically, known as a yes-yes exercise. These movements are employed to help synchronize the eyes with the inner ear canals and the neck muscles. By pressing the icon on the left lower side of the screen, the patient is guided through the movement sequence described previously. The no-no and/or yes-yes exercises can be applied at the various lateral and vertical gaze targets.